What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Revit Tools video. In this video, we'll be looking at the Move tool. It's a very useful tool. It's probably one of the most useful tools in all of Revit. It's one you'll be using almost non-stop. So in this video, we'll go over a number of different ways you can use the Move tool, why you might use it, and some different things you can do with the Move tool. So what I've got laid out here is a number of different elements. If I were to look at the architecture tab, just pulled out a bunch of random elements from these different tools up here, and we're gonna start moving them. We're gonna see what happens. So if I go to the modified tab and I hit the move, which is the default hotkey is MV, I'll have the option to choose what I want to move. You'll see how my cursor has this move option on it. It matches the same icon there. So I can come over here to this wall, I can select it, and if you look down here at the bottom left, it's going to say click to select, tab for alternates, control adds, and shift deselects. And when I'm done choosing what I want to choose to move, which I've chosen this wall, I hit enter, and I immediately see this dotted dashed line around my selection, and I have the move icon that's up, and I'm now prompted to choose a point to where I want to move this wall from. So I'll choose this endpoint here, and then I'll have the option to move this specific element wherever I want. So at this point, I have the option to, zoom in, and maybe I want it to be exactly 2 feet 10, and I can get in here and say, okay, that's 2 feet 10 in that direction. I also have the opportunity to type a specific dimension. But something to note when it comes to that is whenever I start typing, at that moment where the direction that the wall is headed, and you can tell the direction the wall is headed is based on that new outline that you're dragging around. It's basically the destination. The direction that wall is headed will be it'll take the length that you input and then move it in that direction. So I'll press and hold shift to force a 90 degrees. You can see how that's forced at 90 degrees. The second I go beyond 45 there, it jumps to the other 90 degrees. So I'm going to pull it up to here, and then I'm going to start typing. I'm going to do 2 feet 10 again. And this is also something to note. While you're holding shift, you can't actually type. It's funny and kind of counterintuitive because maybe you do want that 90-degree angle, but regardless, we can achieve that 90-degree angle without actually having to hold shift down. It just helps to get you oriented. So I'm at 90 degrees there, and I want to move 2 feet 10, so I'm just going to type 2. You can do this any way you want, really. You can do 2 apostrophe space 10 inches. You could also do 210, which I prefer. This is much easier, much quicker. By default, Revit is in feet, so it's going to take the 2, and then any space after that, everything else will be inches. So 2 feet 10. This is something else to note as well, and the reason I've dimensioned this is whenever you're moving elements that are dimensioned, it's just the way Revit works. I don't like it, but when you move an element that's dimensioned, it will delete the dimension, which is really a shame because oftentimes you want to keep those dimensions. But I'll press OK, and we can see we moved 2 feet 10, but we lost the dimension. That's okay. It's not a big deal. It's going to happen. A lot of times we'll wait to dimension our plans well after we're done moving walls for that very reason. So again, I'm going to hit MV, and I have the option to move this door, and I'll move it around. Works just the same with this window. Boom. Something else that's important to know when using the move command is that the command itself it's work plane based, and you wouldn't normally think that about the move tool because you're just moving things around, but everything is work plane based. So I'm on the level 1 floor plan, which means the work plane for this view is level 1. It's the floor plan, and everything that I try and move, like for instance this desk, will move about this floor plan. And so all of these things easily can be moved. Essentially everything in Revit can be moved. And these are just a few examples of things. This is a ceiling that I've forced to be showing on this floor plan. Moving that around. Just a basic railing. You can move that around. Here's a ramp. We'll move that around. Stairs. You can move that around. Of course, stairs are difficult, so you'll want to actually select the entire stair, and oftentimes things are pinned. You'll have to unpin those and then move the stair, and yet you'll still get things that will end up having to be deleted, which in this case it's just the stair path. That's not a huge deal. We'll press OK and it'll move. Model text is not a big deal. That moves. Grid lines. A lot of times you'll want to pin your grid lines, because if you end up moving them this easily, then that could be problems, because oftentimes walls or different model elements, columns, are associated to grid lines, so having those locked down a little better will be key. Reference planes, not a big deal, moves just like everything else. So right now I've got a floor plan, just real basic floor plan laid out, and just like we saw moving different elements from above, if I move this wall over, it's gonna disassociate that dimension string that I had to the wall. In other words, break the dimension. And because this wall was essentially isolated from every other wall, it just moved on its own. It's not a big deal. I'll undo that. The door, you can move the door outside of its host, but it's going to tell you that the door is outside of its host, and it will not be copied or moved in this case. So I essentially just deleted the door by moving it outside of the wall, i.e. its host. So that's something to note as well. I'll undo that as well. So we'll go to a 3D view, and if we once we get to a 3D view, things change when it comes to the move tool, because like I said in the beginning, the move tool is based on the work plane that you're currently working in, that's currently set. And what you select, depending on what it is, sometimes is defaulted to a certain work plane. Maybe it's hosted to a certain work plane, but generally the work plane is based on the view. But that changes when you get to 3D, because you can set the work plane to really anything else. Whereas a floor plan or elevation or section, all those work planes are defined for you based on the type of view that it is. So once I start to try and move things around here, I'll move this wall, and if I just try and move it around, it's going to move the wall just fine, successfully, not a big deal. But unfortunately, nothing went with it, and that's okay. We'll address that towards the end of this video, so I'll undo that for now. But let's attempt to move this desk and see what happens. So I'm going to select this desk, and I'm actually going to isolate this desk in the view. And to do that, you can come down to the sunglasses and hit isolate element, and you'll see this temporary hide isolate up here. The outline of the Revit work window will be blue, telling you that you are in a temporary view. And so basically we can only see this desk, which is pretty wonderful. So now let's see what happens when I'm in a 3D view and I try and move this. So we can see the dashed outline there is the work plane, and basically that is telling us the plane with which this element will move. So if I move this desk, it's simply moving on that first level, that first floor plane, because in this case the desk is hosted to that work plane, which is level 1. So I can move that easily, no problem, not a big deal. This is another important thing to know about the move tool. I'm attempting to move this desk again, and I'm currently only getting this desk to move in 2 directions, and I'm not holding shift. But if we come up to the top left, we can see that I have furniture selected, and I'm trying to move furniture, and it's currently constrained. And clearly we can see that it's constrained because I'm only able to move this desk basically 90 degrees. And so one thing I can do is I can hit constrain. I can decheck constrain, and now I have the option to move this desk everywhere on this work plane, which is perfect. It's probably what I want. So I'll do that, and once again, now that I've moved it and unconstrained it, now I have the option to move it once again unconstrained, because I have gone through the trouble of unconstraining. So I can move that, and that's great. So now we know that, first we know that this desk is hosted to level 1. We can see the host right there is level 1. And we can also see the elevation from the level is 0, which tells me that it's sitting on level 1. That's probably what we want. Now, maybe we enter a circumstance where this desk, or whatever it might be, needs to be above level 1, but still within this area. So if I try and move now, again, we're going to get that work plane that's sitting on level 1, and maybe we don't want that. So this is one of the most powerful things about working in 3D. So I'm going to orbit around and orbit to a different location and try and move. And again, I still see this work plane sitting on level 1, and that's not going to do me any good because I want to move this desk up, for instance. So if you know the direction you need to move this desk or whatever it might be, any other element, you'll have to set a work plane. You'll have to change the work plane. And one way to do that, of course, is to go to the Architecture tab, and towards the end you'll see Work Plane, and you can set that work plane to really anything else, and you even have the option to pick a plane. Now, I'm not going to go through that at all in this video because that'll be a separate tool video for the Set tool when it comes to setting a work plane in Revit. So I'm going to call this temporary work planes, or hidden work planes, or magical work planes, if you will. So one way to get around having to set work planes all the time in 3D is to use this view cube up here. And it's very powerful because I'm going to go to the right, I'm going to press right, and because I have that desk selected, it's going to zoom in on my selection being the desk and center that on the screen and orient the view to the right, which is exactly what I want. And so now, with the desk selected, I'm going to attempt to move the desk. And now we can see that we, in effect, have changed the work plane at which I'm moving this desk. And you can 100% see that if I were to orbit around. If I orbit around this desk, before I force that right orientation of the view, that work plane by the dashed line was on the ground. It was on level 1. But now that I've changed that view orientation to the right, I now have a different work plane. And so that's why I call that, in a way, a temporary work plane. And so what that allows me to do is, now that I've kind of forced that work plane, I can move that desk in that vertical work plane, which is exactly what I was trying to do. And so now I have the opportunity to move the desk in a vertical plane because I can see how it's working. I can see that it is actually moving in that plane, but I'm trying to move it up and it's not working. But again, I can see that the desk is also constrained. So let me unconstrain that, and now we have the option to move this desk anywhere that we want in that vertical plane, which is perfect because maybe I want to move it up. So I'll go back to that work plane, and there we are. I'll attempt to move it. I will see that I'm constrained. I will unconstrain it, and now I can see this is perfect. This is what I want. But why does that still happen? That's weird. Why would that happen? I'll go back to that right orientation. I will select the desk. I'll see I have the work plane. I'll select it. This is something to note too. I can press and hold shift, and while pressing and holding shift works to constrain, it also works to unconstrain. So I can unconstrain there that way, And with the desk unconstrained, I can move it. And you would think that the desk would move, but it is in fact because the host is level 1 and that the elevation from level 1 is set to 0. And you can see I don't have any options to choose that. It's sort of baked in. So there's really nothing I can do about that. So I can choose a new host, but I don't have anything to host it in this view. So we'll go to a different element when it comes to moving something up and down. The ceiling is a perfect example. And if we were to, let's select the ceiling and the desk. I will isolate these elements in the view, and I'll go to this back view here so we can see these both in the same view. So when we select this desk, I can see the elevation from level and the host are both grayed out, which that tells me I don't have any control over that. Once I have hosted this desk to level 1, it's stuck there for all intents and purposes. I can copy it around and all that, but this instance of the desk it's there. It is on level 1 and I can't move it. Now the ceiling is on level 1 and the height from the level is currently 3. And because it's not grayed out, I have the option of changing this myself. So I can change this to 4 feet and I can see it move up 1 foot. Perfect. Okay. So now if I'm in a 3D view like we had with the desk earlier, I'll attempt to move the ceiling, and now by default, because this ceiling is a ceiling and was made in a plan view and had to be made in some sort of horizontal view, the default work plane is going to be parallel to level 1. I'll call it that for now. It's going to be parallel to level 1. So maybe I want to move this up or move this somewhere else. So I can go back to this back orientation, and you can see once I get to this back orientation while I'm trying to move, I'm getting this error that says can't draw because the work plane is very sharp. Well, that work plane, which is the dashed line there, I'm trying to basically move the ceiling like towards me and away from me, and I'm basically looking at the side of the work plane, which does not work at all, and I can't move anything with that sharp of an angle, which is exactly what it's telling me, and it makes sense. So what it's telling me to do is use a different work plane. So now that I've forced this back temporary work plane, I can just hit the move tool again, and immediately we can see that this work plane updates to this back orientation, which is exactly what we want in this case. So now we can confirm, zoom in, and see, yes, I have this work plane that is now vertical. And much like we had the desk, it comes in as constrained. And so I can press and hold shift and see, okay, I can begin to move this around. And as I click, I can see that ceiling goes exactly where I want. And not only that, but the height offset from the level updates to where it actually is. In this case now, it's associated to level 2, and it's 8 feet 5 and 1/28 inch above the level there at level 2. So I will now go and reset the temporary height, and that will bring everything back. And we're going to go back to this wall here. I'm going to move this wall, and we can see that the wall, because it's hosted to this floor, it's on level 1, the work plane is associated right there. And that's fine. We'll move it out here. So we can see it did exactly what we thought it would do. The wall moved, nothing else came with it. That's okay, not a big deal. But this is something else to note. I'm going to go, this is a basic floor. I'll edit the boundary, and I'll show you right here. If you choose pick walls, you have the option to extend into wall core, which basically says the wall or the floor will extend into the core of the wall that it's associated to. So if I get out of this, we could see once we go in here now, I'll go to that particular wall, the structure of the wall, the core boundary, this being a basic wall, there's just one piece to this, and the structure it's just this 8-inch piece of generic thickness. So in this case, the floor is extending through to the edge of the core. And so how does this all play into the move tool, you might wonder. So you saw me move the wall, and it moved, not a big deal. But because I've extended the floor to the core of the wall, and I'd also like to note that I've done the same with the roof. So I've extended the floor and the roof to the core of the walls, like all four of these perimeter walls. As I move the walls, and in this case it's sort of move, it is technically moving, but it's not the move tool. So if you use your arrow keys, it's technically called the nudge. So we're moving, but we're calling it nudging. It is because it's called nudging. I'll use this right arrow key, and because I have associated that floor and roof to the core of the wall, it is moving with the wall. Because I'm moving the wall through nudging, all of these walls and the floor and roof are both going with it. And so this is sort of a move. It's not the move tool, but it's moving. And you can also notice once I select this wall, I get a temporary dimension, and in this case it's 13.8. I can click on that, and maybe I want this temporary dimension to be 5 feet. I can change that, and just like the nudge, using the arrow keys to nudge, the wall and roof both went with the wall. And that's because it was not technically moving or hard moving this wall out of place. So that's just something to note. And finally, when it comes to that, using the nudge, I'll drag this ceiling over here. I will zoom into the top here, and hitting the arrow keys left and right, you can see the minimal change that nudging has. And in fact, that changes as you zoom in. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It must be some weird percentage of moving, but as you zoom in, it'll nudge less, and as you zoom out farther, it will nudge more. But I wouldn't recommend using nudging all that much, because you start to get lots of imperfections and some weird dimensions when things start to get nudged ever so slightly throughout the model. But I'm covering it just so you know what's happening, and you can actually come up here to the undo tool and see all of these nudges. And if you're seeing that, I would hope that there's a reason that you're doing that, and a lot of times there is, and I have to nudge certain things, but so that's why I'm covering it. So finally, to wrap this up, while I can nudge left and right using the left and right arrow keys, all the arrow keys, I can nudge in every direction. If I hold shift and nudge, it's almost like a larger nudge, if you will. I don't have a better way of describing it, because it's still nudging, it's just a lot more of a nudge, which sounds kind of stupid, but it's a bigger nudge. There's a standard nudge, and there's holding shift and nudging. So it just a little piece of tool that I don't use all that much. I don't like to use it because of the imperfections you get inherently, but that's the move tool. A little bit more about moving in general and what happens when you use temporary dimensions to move, nudging, and all that. I really hope you learned something. If you did, if you would let me know by liking this video, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I will get back to you as soon as I can, and look forward to the next video. Thanks for watching.